could this be the time for Africa to start doing intra-African business, develop new economies? And that's one of the things I'd like to explore. I think let's not wait for Kojo. He can just fall in if and when he joins. And I see Glenton, it's been recording again, so
just pause there quickly. Yeah.
To we transfer the lot to me afterwards, please, and then I can share it everywhere. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, not a problem.
Hopefully by tomorrow I'll have my internet back.
It's okay.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. SAACI Africa, having a chat to people from the industry. This afternoon, we are looking at the association industry on the continent. Associations obviously being a big part of our event sector, and also quite a big contributor to our economies. We've got some amazing people who join our panel today. I'm not going to waste time introducing them. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and give some background, and then we'll go into a short discussion as to where do we see this, this industry going in the near future. We're going to look into our magic crystal balls and try and make sense of something that makes no sense at all. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Jeffers Miruka, who is joining us from Kenya.
Thanks, Tess, for the opportunity to join you in this discussion. What I can say is that I've been in webinars and these Zoom events for almost every day since I self-quarantined myself or started working from home more than 3 weeks ago. My name is Jeffers Miruka, as you rightfully put it. I'm the CEO of the African Association of Agricultural Economics, a 1,650 strong membership from around Africa, and also nationally, dealing with issues to do with policy and food security in Africa. I'm also the president of the African Society of Association Executives, which I'm sure some of you know about. And the AFSAE, as we call it, was established in 2015 in South Africa during Meetings Africa, and it's the voice of the association industry in Africa. So I'm privileged to be part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Jeffers. Esmery, let's hand over to you. Esmery is joining us from Somerset West near Cape Town in South Africa. Esmery, over to you.
Thank you, Tess, and thank you to SAACI Africa for the opportunity. My name is Esmery Steinhoffel. I'm the Regional Director for Africa, specifically looking after the continent for ICCA, the International Congress and Convention Association. Also an industry membership-based association. Globally, we've got over 1,000 members in nearly 100 countries, and we specifically work in the space of association conferences.
That's amazing. Quite an exciting industry to have been in, but we'll explore the change, the sudden change overnight about FACE shortly. Glenton, I'd like to hand over to you. Glenton is joining us from Johannesburg. Thank you, Glenton.
Thank you, Tess, and thanks to everybody else for being on the call. Glenton de Kock, CEO for the Southern African Association for the Conference Industry, known within Southern Africa as SAACI. 500 plus member-based organization that cuts across from a PCO to event organizer to a venue to an AV company and supplies within the meetings, incentives, conferences, and event space. And thanks for having me on today.
Thank you so much, Glenton. So I think let's start with you, Jeffers. But then again, I forgot to introduce myself. Everybody, sorry, I assume everybody knows me, but I can't be that short-sighted. So my name is Tess Bruce. I am the president of SAACI Africa, which is the Society of Incentive Travel Excellence, and also the founder of Crystal Events Africa. That said, and out of the way, Jeffers, let's have a chat with you with regard to the bigger picture on association conferences across the continent. You probably have a bit of a helicopter view being involved or heading up African associations, what was the immediate impact from where you sat the day that they started announcing the travel bans?
Thanks, Tess, for that question. You know, as I sit here, I've been receiving tons and tons of email, especially from our members and from the industry about the overall effect of what we're going through, not only in Africa, but around the world. And I can tell you, and we can all agree together that this is like no any other crisis we're facing as an industry in Africa and around the world. Nobody thought something like this was coming. Nobody could accurately predict. You know, the first cases we saw from China, we thought perhaps it could be something which could be swept under the carpet, but we do realize that we are in a very precarious state. I have been speaking with a couple of our members, and sometimes we meet with intermittently. This pandemic has affected, number one, our membership meetings. I spoke with somebody yesterday from actually down in South Africa who called me and told me that he had an event in New Zealand and he came back and he was quarantined for 14 days. So when I sent him an email and he responded back, he said it was really quite a good emotional break because he was feeling so lonely. So there is that emotional challenge. Number two, our associations, most of them, some of them are canceling the events and some of them are actually postponing the events. But we all realize that some of our associations in Africa, other than membership fee, which they charge when they're hosting events, they also dependent mostly on sponsorships. There are some organizations like companies, corporates, which put some money on the table to sponsor these events. And I'm sure South Africa is a good example where that happens. And some of them have been forced to cancel the events because the sponsors have put the sponsorship on hold and they are not saying anything. They say we cannot discuss anything like this until after we know the way forward. So for an association which are normally dependent on sponsorships from a sponsor like a big organization, they don't have an option other than to cancel the event. As we sit here today, as we talk about this, none of us can actually accurately say how long this is going to take and what is going to happen post COVID-19 itself. Nobody knows. So some have taken a cautious approach and are postponing the event because they had already taken money from the attendees, from the participants in terms of event registration. So, you know, refunding each and every one of them the actual amount which they paid is a bit more costly, given that some of us associations were dependent on hand to mouth. When I say hand to mouth, is what comes in is spent, and after we spend it in our events, that's when we sit back and look at anything that you can call like maybe something which has remained out of a surplus and be able to actually plan. So they can't naturally do that because refunding is very expensive. And some members are quite understanding, but some of their delegates are demanding on full refund. And we all know what that means. So ideally, where I'm sitting and the information I keep on gathering, yesterday I was on call from a friend in New York at the latest epicenter of this pandemic. And it's not any better in the US. You know, we have seen America coming up with a very huge stimulus package to help the organizations and also the associations. The American Society of Association Executives requested $25 billion from the federal government to support the American associations who have been impacted by the COVID-19. But when you come to our continent in Africa, I don't know who is going to really come with a stimulus program and which government is actually prepared for that. None. So we are left in that awkward state where we have to see how we can deal with it. But I can tell you that what we are experiencing is one of a lifetime in our generation, and associations and the tourism industry in general, which you can all agree with me, has really seen the impact, and we don't know how long that will take us to come back to even where we started from.
Indeed. Jeffers, thank you for that. So overall, pretty much a bleak picture for the industry. I think we are watching an industry hemorrhaging at all levels. I would like to circle back to you a bit later, looking at opportunities within Africa and support. And just on that point, I spoke to one of our site board members recently who lost a massive conference for Cape Town. They were supposed to take place in June, then moved to early December, and then decided to cancel. The conference will now be done virtually as we see the way things are going, and we'll touch on that a bit later again. But they were at least protected with a cancellation clause. So for any cancellations, there was a 5% admin fee, which somehow managed to keep them not from basically they obviously didn't make any money off the conference, but the refunds did not cost them. So it's more of a break-even situation from what I understood. It's obviously too late for the events that have already been signed and sealed, but for future, that's maybe something we should consider to safeguard ourselves. On that note, Esmarie, let's move across to you. The ICCA Africa chapter, it's you're relatively new in the position, and then Africa is relatively new with ICCA membership, and it's probably quite frustrating being in a situation where you've just started developing membership and promoting conferences within and across Africa, and suddenly one hits a wall. Give us your overview and experience on things.
Yes, I think it's important for any industry association at the moment to really now focus on communicating with the members even more than before, and not just think, oh, people are on lockdown and they're sitting at home and I don't have to do anything at the moment, and find sort of new ways to be creative about things. Yeah, stay in contact with the members. We all in the situation together, as I said, and look at maybe new and different ways, because COVID-19 is going to come to an end eventually. At the moment, none of us knows exactly when people will start to travel again and have conferences. But make sure that we are ready when it is going to go back to normal. Also, this is an ideal time, again, in the case of ICCA, where I'm really focusing on doing database training with the members, because during lockdown and during COVID-19, because associations is long lead time business, you can still, as an ICCA member, do your research for a potential conference that might come to your destination in 2-3 years' time. We all have time now to update our CRM systems, update our databases. So I think it's important that we do use this negative situation that we're all in and still try and find a positive, so that, yeah, when COVID-19 is over, we can all really hit the ground running and ensure that for Africa and then for my colleagues in the other parts of the world, we still get more conferences and new conferences to, in our case, come to Africa. And again, I think what might happen when COVID-19 is over, people might be a bit more weary for long-haul travel. They might first want to do something that's not like that long a flight. And again, an ideal opportunity for the African continent to actually focus on regional events in Africa.
100%, 100%. Thank you for that. Let's circle back to Esmarie a bit later. Let's hear from Glenton. If you can please let us know who you are and give us an overview on the South African state of affairs.
Yes, so as said earlier, Glenton de Kock, representing the South African Association for the Conference Industry, known in South Africa as SAACI. I want to concur with the two previous speakers. I think the opportunity for ourselves as association was to communicate effectively in an early basis, in knowing that we need to first inform about what COVID-19 was all about, and what really sort of knocked us before the restrictions came into place in South Africa on the 15th of March was that we already had restrictions around the number of people gathering. So one of the first industries to really almost be shut down before the national-wide lockdown was the events industry across the board. That has then meant that we would need to look at our own sort of housekeeping, review a lot of our own association strategy, but also understand how deep the effect of the nationwide lockdown has had on the events sector. More so to understand how best do we start recovery. So in the last few days, a number of conversations I've been part of is to understand what the recovery looks like. The challenge with that, though, is that in some of the conversations earlier before this particular call, indications are that we might potentially either come out of lockdown, which is, I think, about 7 to 8 days away. The other two potential dates is middle of May or towards the end of May, as worst case scenario, and that's purely based on the scenarios that the health experts with government are going to probably be running over the next couple of days as such. What the lockdown has allowed us to do, though, is communicate more. I think now more than ever within associations, and I think within our member base, the number of webinars, the number of conversations I've been part of potentially would not have happened if it was business as normal, as a starting base. Second to that is what the lockdown has also allowed us to consider is taking on new forms of gathering people in places and also connecting around, as we've done today with Jeffers, was connecting around Africa in a far more quicker way than we probably would have done previously as well. The opportunity for ourselves, though, is that as an association is to build on this into the future. So I've been saying to a number of people, the whole notion of not being able to work from home, I think if you had problems with that in the past, definitely not now. I think all of us that have been traveling around the globe through the positions that we have, and we're fortunate to do that, now understand that you can actually work from home, you can actually connect with people. However, as somebody has reminded me consistently, we all still need human contact. But I think that is something that we'll manage going forward with time. So on a South African basis, while we're in the lockdown, a lot of work has taken place, a lot of conversations have taken place in respect of how do we get out of this. And I think we're going to get out of it very, very, very slowly. I think two things are going to be key. One is the confidence to travel. And I think a lot of inner city travel will take place, a lot of meetings. I think particularly where I'm based in Johannesburg, the potential will be the starting base where a lot of meetings will happen within cities first and within the regions or provinces from a South African perspective before people start traveling around the country as a starting base, and even I think around our continent as well. So there has been a bit of positiveness during the lockdown because it has allowed us to reevaluate and relook some of strategies, some of the sort of general thinking we've had beforehand. But the opportunity does exist now for hybrid events within the event space. And I think also, as Ismarie's alluded to, the online learning opportunity now more than ever has presented itself as a must-do in the future.
Clinton, thank you for those insights. And I think we are generally agreed that local and domestic travel probably will return first. Then a little bit later, I'd like to explore it on a regional basis, and I'm very happy that Kojo from Ghana is able to join us. Welcome, Kojo. Before I put Kojo on the line, can I just redirect to you, Clinton, and perhaps some of our other panelists will have some thoughts as well. While we recognize that we as an industry, pretty much an events and meetings, a gathering industry, will have to reinvent the way we do things, how do we find ways to support our supporting industries such as your exhibition builders, your stand builders, your entertainment people, your catering people? Any thoughts on how can they re-engage and reinvent themselves within the industry?
Okay, that is an interesting question because somebody asked a similar one, I think, a couple of days ago in respect of, so how do we start recovery? Well, recovery around the globe can only start with government assistance because for all intents and purposes, all of us from an industry side, you can't necessarily harness commercialization or even look at any potential earnings in that regard. So while all of us are looking at government to do that, I think government legislation, structural reforms from a South African perspective requires us to ensure that, particularly from an exhibition perspective, and I use the example quite extensively, the first thing that will take place is obviously a conference or a meeting. Attached to that, you can have an exhibition that is driven by trade. And ourselves in this particular space, we are an important cog in the wheel, because whether it's a manufacturing in Durban or a manufacturing trade show, a lot of our exhibition or stand builders are also then feeding back into another sector of society or another economic sector of society. And sometimes there's a misunderstanding around the events industry when it comes to government in reference to the government support that they've provided over time. So we're not a traditional sort of made for the past industry where you link into a particular tourism. A lot of my colleagues get upset for me, but a tourist is first a business individual or business person. And they go to a particular destination, they like it, they come back with their families, and then they become a tourist. In this instance, the requirement for us to consider how we can restart that is that we probably have to have an aggressive campaign that speaks to government across all of the departments and sectors, highlighting the fact that we've got specialists who can actually assist with recovery and the knowledge building going forward as well. Because I can't for the life of me see the past being part of our future. I don't think that's really going to happen. And I think our industry has an important role to play that, because a lot of us know that we play in the knowledge-based space, where we bring people together to share. And I think AFSAE, in terms of the work that they do from ICCA, brings a lot of people to destinations to think about new ideas and think about new ways of doing things as well. So it's obviously quite a long-winded response, but I think a response that in the elements that takes place before an event happens. The economy's already started, and in this instance, unfortunately, we're going to be relying on government to restart that economy for us.
Sure. Thank you for those thoughts, Clinton. Indeed, food for thought there. And again, an industry will have to figure out a way to support each other and make things work into the future. So part of my reason for having these chats, industry and sector-specific chats, is to collectively figure a way as to how we could potentially make things work within Africa. Find new ways of doing business intra-Africa. Of course, airlines will be key. Our airlines within Africa are not in a good space right now. But from an aviation point of view, between AviaDev and our Westgrow teams, there are some very interesting and amazing chats happening, which you will find all of those links on my social media. And in fact, we'll have a separate discussion on aviation as well next week. And at that point, I'd like to link into Kojo Bentham-Williams from Ghana. Kojo, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, fantastic. Yes, thank you. Thank you, we can. If you can get your volume a little bit up, that will be great, but we can hear you. I know you joined the conversation late, but could you perhaps give us some insights from your point of view, being involved with many of the events across the African continent? Perhaps first introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and give us your perspective on association and conferencing business across the continent.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kojo Bentham-Williams. I'm the publisher and the editor of Voyage Africa Travel Magazine, and I've been writing and reporting on tourism on the continent, and as well as events, as well as doing some communication for the UNWTO in Africa. Good afternoon, everybody. Once again, with respect to how things is going to be, as I learned from my webinar with other experts last week, I think that the conversation about whether we need to have a recovery or we need to start again is something that this whole coronavirus is kind of exposed a lot of things that I think, with the benefit of hindsight, could have been done better. Now, if I go to the point of association and event point of view, obviously, aviation, travel are all propellers that ensure that we have a very holistic approach to it. And if African leaders or governments are not allowing airlines to have the fleet freedom, people are being overprotectionist of the zone, then it'll be difficult because we can do as much. You can do as much association point of view, hotels, GMOs, but if we don't have these bases, because flying within Africa is very expensive. Now the thing is, the silver lining perhaps may be that after all this coronavirus, we'll be back to rock bottom, i.e. the airlines, aviation, and all of that. Some of them may collapse. And now they will see the real need to have partnership, because we know airlines are flying some routes that is not profitable, simply can't work. So the thing about working together would be, will come to the fore for us to be able to know that if our government can take, strong position, not just political talks, because I've been in meetings that you go, everything is passed, we will do that, we will do that. I have a lot of documents on my table, and I know that you meet as ministers, it's going to be done, and nothing get done. So in my point of view, association, of course, and I believe, personally, my views is that the event space might just be the mind space of the tourism industry. And if you look at the numbers, it will tell you leisure is fine, it's okay. Obviously, domestic tourism is going to come back. But imagine all the events from the boardroom to the bigger events. These are not happening. Then if we're not having key things like data, we might as well forget it. Because if you don't have data, you can't plan. It's going to be key, it's going to be crucial that if we look for data, if you're going to be to one data, it's difficult to get. If you talk to them, they'll give you data which is not reliable. So if we plan our restart or recovery based on false data or inaccurate data, then you must as well guess what's going to happen. So these are very key things that I think that should have taken place long ago. And the fact that we can leverage well, because if you look at how the virus was spreading, initially it was of course after China, it went to Europe and then America. And so you could have seen that Africa still had the chance to, if you like, travel within themselves or have some movement. We literally had just finished meetings Africa, and then after 1, 2, 3 weeks, then everything comes to a stop. The point I'm just making is that if we can build the basics of saying that, why do I need to travel to South Africa and pay over $1,500? Because the charges of African government airlines are so expensive. And these people are not, charity. Then again, the other key thing is a lot of corruption, sorry to use, but this is, it has plagued our airlines across the continent. So in as much as we preach and we encourage the tourism board, the government to come think, they are the key fundamentals that the government itself as a central government is not doing. And we will do all the best things. The point now will be that if we can have the will, the political will, to push these things, because you don't understand why events, some other event that I write about as a journalist, believe that we have to decide the fate of Africa and Europe. I mean, it's fine. We live in a global space, which is good. But if you look at the context where Africa leaders themselves have to go and decide AU's thing in Switzerland, it doesn't make sense. And the fact that they cannot still agree that the meeting space, still now, maybe in Southern Africa, of course, much more developed, but in West Africa, these are my opinion, I thought that, I would like to share. And we are back to a situation that in Ghana now, 85% of our tourism and everything is from outside. So obviously, we can't say anything. And hotels, they are not actually fair logging. That's just dismissing people because they can, in terms of advocacy, and leaders, ministers, tourism board people can take the bold, initiative to ensure that then we have the finest opportunity to either change or rot forever. So that's my initial thought.
Thank you, Kojo. A lot of food for thought there as well. Touching on governments, as Clinton also alluded to, need governments to make things happen. and there's inevitably an amount of corruption within governments. So getting African governments to hold hands and play nicely and work together is going to be challenging, but perhaps that's where we should focus our efforts and keep lobbying. I'm just thinking about opportunities within Africa to keep intra-African travel alive, as we haven't seen it before. To that point, Jeffers, let's get back to you. During this time, have you, by any chance, seen any new inquiries for future business from any of your members that you're aware of?
That's a good question. You know, the way associations are trained to work is we have events which take place after a certain period of time. And when I sit here, I'm speaking about the events which have been affected are events taking place this year. And when I look all the way to around August, I see most events are being cancelled. I'm not saying that after August everything is going to be okay, but it's just a matter of wait and see to actually be able to know what's going to happen after August. But I see other cancellations going beyond August. But for the year 2021, obviously, whatever plans which have been there for most associations are still underway, with that belief that when we go to 2021, things will be so much under control. We are all praying for that, and we are all looking forward to actually that time to come. But what we do not know is, are we going back to business as usual, or is it going to be totally different than the way it has been? So that is something, again, that's like a puzzle which we have to wait and be able to respond to. So associations, as they currently stand, any events which were taking place between this month of April all the way to July, most of them have been cancelled. I personally had to cancel an event which was to take place in June. I had to cancel it because really, I don't think any of us can be reasonable enough to say that an event taking place in June will still go on with all the restrictions. There is nobody who is flying. Even if things were to change in the next two weeks, people will still be skeptical and afraid of traveling because nothing reassures them that now traveling is going to be safe for me and also safe for my family when I come back. You know, right now, all the governments in South Africa, you're going through a total lockdown. In Kenya, we're going through a partial lockdown. I don't know what's happening in Ghana, but I know that Ghana is also going through some difficult situations like Kojo will tell us. So even if everything was to be reopened back in the next 1 month, some of us would still be afraid. Some of us would still want to wait and see attitude. So for associations at the moment as we speak, I know for sure that none has mentioned to me that the event scheduled for 2021 has been organized or cancelled or postponed. I know that it still remains to be seen, not because there's so many unknowns going forward from today going forward. But I know that events spanning all the way to end of up to August have been cancelled, and we are yet to see many more being cancelled. But coming back to the issue of intra-Africa trade, you know, we have what we call recently last year in May there was the African Continental Free Trade Agreement was actually came into effect, and basically what this means is trying to promote intra-Africa business. We all hope that can happen, but there is one thing we call the single African air transport market, and I know all of us know about it. And Kojo, as a journalist, will probably tell us more about the single African air transport market, which is earmarked to actually propel Africa to be more able to connect and make connection easy and keep within Africa itself in Vision 2063. But we still have very few countries, let me put it like that, who are taking that up. As long as it's much cheaper for me to fly from Nairobi to Frankfurt, it will cost me about $700 a return ticket. It might cost you about $600 from South Africa to Frankfurt on a return ticket. But for me to travel from Nairobi to Abuja, it will cost me about $1,200 a return ticket. So that is double. So as long as we are still going through that issues, inter-African issues, where we believe that if Kenyan Airways is flying to, let's say, Tunisia, and then because it must fly via the airspace of Sudan, it must fly via the airspace of maybe Central African Republic, Libya before it goes, having those barriers that every airspace you fly to, you have to pay for it, that will continue to make the intra-Africa business much more difficult. And again, there's no much competition in Africa. We have about 5 airlines in Africa, which you can say that can take you from station A to station B. Because you can tell us that West Africa, traveling within West Africa itself is the most difficult thing as an African. You may even want to experience. So leave alone East Africa, leave alone South Africa, but West Africa itself, it's really, really difficult. And then this brings us to those issues. What do our trade blocs, like the ECOWAS, which has been done for so long, I think, which is very solid, what has it done to make sure that flying within the Africa, and especially West Africa, is something more affordable? Kojo will fly to Dubai from Ghana much cheaper than him actually flying from Accra to Abuja, Nigeria, which is basically a drive away sometimes, or maybe Lagos.
Absolutely. I think that Africa has been infamous for extremely intra-African, expensive intra-African flights. And that is something I do know that John and his team from Aviadev are trying to address, and also getting that Yamasutra agreement since 1988 signed, and I think we all understand that politics is probably the biggest prohibitor of getting better airlift and cheaper airlift within Africa. But is this not an opportunity for governments to now agree and make it a little bit easier, make it a bit more affordable? If it becomes affordable, travel can happen. If Africans can afford the travel, chances are we'll start seeing movement, and certainly better opportunities for those associations to move around Africa to attend those events. Kojo, I'm going to give you the floor for a couple of minutes, and then I'd like to move back to Esmery. Thanks, Kojo.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. I think that Jeff has hit the point right in the head, and it's something that leaders have always spoken about. And if you care, West Africa is a very complex region. Okay, so you have the English side and the Francophone side. And apart from that, I mean, you won't believe, if you want to drive through from Accra to Lomé to Benin to Nigeria, I mean, you may have about I think, let me have a head count, maybe 15 blocks or something. And it's so cumbersome, and you can't still understand why we still have these things in place. So it's much more disincentive for us to even trade and do travel within a SAACI region. And a lot of times if you look at the Yamoussoukro Convention, they signed a thing, people have to give, even now, I know in Kenya, Ethiopia was trying to have the fifth freedom to fly from Nairobi to I think Brussels. Now Kenya Airways is into a whole lot of problems. So that the government of Kenya is not willing to give ET, the fifth freedom. So politics is involved in everything. And if you sometimes, I'm sorry to say, but you speak to decent people, I mean, who are very switched on, but when they get to politics, everything changes. So unless we will have the will to say that we may have to push, I mean, of course, we have to continue pushing to make sure that government will see the importance of tourism. And tourism is very, if you look at it, employing 80% of SME Africa, they stand a better chance to benefit. So it's, I don't know, but all comes to policy and decision making. Associations, tourism board can do their bit. But if I'm going to get a visa, let me give an instance. I think, when was it? A year ago, South Africa. I've become South Africa for many years. Now I go there, they say that they give me 1 month visa, come back, except it was so bad. You can't, I mean, I couldn't even think about it. So I had to write an email to I think the consul, and he called me and said, oh, he didn't know that. And I said, okay, imagine, because I'm a journalist, I have people speaking to all of that. There are a lot of people who want to go attend business, and because of visa, they couldn't go. So if you're saying we want Africa 2063 by the African Union, these basic things that we need to do, we are not even doing it. So you sometimes wonder whether, I mean, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but the fact is that our leaders meet every time, and you can look at the classical case of coronavirus. This issue was ravaging Europe, like I said, and then they went to America. Now, to take a whole measure to address the situation, the whole continent have to wait for Jack Ma, really. I think it's much more insulting, in my own opinion, that African Union never released even the protocols that Africa can have a unique way to solve it. We cannot carry everything hook, line, and sinker and think that it worked in America and all of that. I mean, we live in a global space, so we can pick some good things, but we have different contexts. So leaders, I'm sorry, would have to play a very key role in policy and decision making, because I pay over $450 as tax on my flight going to, say, South Africa. Okay, so you get a ticket. I mean, an African, like any other human being, would like to also have value on the money. It's not the fact that I'm African. So if I have to travel to Cabo Verde or travel to Namibia and it's very expensive, I take my holidays or take my event to Europe, which is quite cheaper. So if, of course, we have to lobby, but the policy and decision makers would have to understand that, like I said, in West Africa, I'm sorry to say, but it's difficult for them to even understand the business events. If government have big events, they think that it's politics as usual. So people from the presidency, from the foreign affairs, think that they have the expertise. And this is a whole expertise that if you don't have, you don't know who are the PCOs and all of that. You just mess yourself up. And government also giving contract to themselves. So first of all, they're killing the industry, and then they don't have the expertise. So if they cannot, admit the fact that this is a very unique sector that you need a skill set to do it, then the base is not right. And for us in West Africa, we will continue to push, but we have a Herculean tax here. I mean, if you take East Africa, if you take Southern Africa, and North Africa, of course, it's different. But we have Herculean tax of just even doing trade between Ghana and Nigeria. You get to a point, one government will say he's stopping it, the other one say he's stopping it. So I'm better off to go and trade outside of the block or look somewhere else. Mm. So unless we can put all this in place and put pressure on them to begin to know this, we can do the much that we can, of course, for our business. But in terms of the gravitas, to ensure that it will take care of the leakage, because I don't understand why trade. People see tourism as entertainment and leisure, and they cannot think about the fact that to have an event, you need, and if you look at the supply chain and you measure that economy, it's a big thing than thinking about the fact that there's engineering or whatever. So they cannot just appreciate that.
Sorry for cutting you short, but we have gone way over time, and Jeffers has to leave in a minute. But thank you. I really agree with you fully. I think we all concur with what you've just said. And yes, we need to lobby. We need to find various platforms amongst ourselves and externally. For instance, the African Tourism Partnership. We keep discussing this at the African Tourism Leadership Forum, where we get governments and everybody agrees, but who makes sure, who's the watchdog to make sure that we don't just talk about it, we actually need to, get the ball rolling and move things forward. And I think now a better time than ever, considering the circumstances where we could hopefully get governments to work together. We won't get all 54 countries to work together, but if, we need to start somewhere. But before we lose Jeffers, Esmery, I just wanted to touch base with you quickly from an ICCA point of view, looking at previous stats and where you saw the gaps in the market. I know the future is as clear as mud, but any thoughts of still trying to improve numbers for meetings, even if they might be virtual? What are the feelings of your members on the continent?
Yes, irrespective of COVID-19, if we look at the 2018 City and Country Rankings report, where ICCA does statistics as per our criteria of a 3-country rotation, minimum 50 people, globally there were in 2018 over 12,000 association meetings. Africa only hosted 414 of that plus 12,000. Which is an amazing opportunity, and we keep on saying, we keep on talking about Africa growing the association market, Africa growing the business events market. But one thing that is desperately needed on the continent is also more convention bureaus, either city or national convention bureaus. We have a limited number, and they mainly in Southern and East Africa bureaus. The rest of the continent, we don't. A lot of the countries will have a tourism authority focusing on the leisure market, which is great. But if you want to focus on business events, irrespective if it's an incentive conference, an association conference, or a corporate event, you need the convention bureaus to promote the destination to either the rest of Africa or to the world. So again, lots of opportunity, but if we don't make sure that together as an industry, together as suppliers, we get more governments to for Africa to establish convention bureaus. That number of 414 that we hosted in 2018 for associations are going to stay more or less the same.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, so apart from looking at Africa developing and promoting business intra-Africa, of course, we need, apart from visas and all sorts of other things, infrastructure first and foremost, which takes money. And we will need to wait and see where the world ends up, because, as I said earlier, industries are hemorrhaging. Apart from your IT companies providing data and some pharmaceutical sectors, the rest of the world is taking a massive hit. So lots of jobs are going to be lost, budgets are going to diminish. So chances are a lot of events are going to be cancelled simply because the companies don't have budget for that. But life must go on. So I suppose it's a case of wait and see. But before Jeffers has to run away, let's just go around the room. Jeffers, parting comments from you before you have to run.
Thanks, Tess, once again. I've always said that in diversity, there is always something light at the end of the tunnel. And whatever we're all going through, it's true that it's really a crisis we're going through because we didn't plan for this. But also, let's look at the opportunities. If there are any opportunities which perhaps can come as a result of this. I always say that an opportunity can be translated like a turning point or maybe a crucial moment to do something which can be more strong. We've now seen that video conference call has spiked. The media were using Zoom. Before March this year, they say it had about 10 million subscribers. But today, as we speak, they say it has more than 300 million subscribers. So as you said, the data companies are benefiting, but also technology companies like Zoom is benefiting. But again, it's that time we need to ask ourselves, can we do things in a different way? Sometimes we also look at an opportunity to have an event, face-to-face event. But I also realized that through what we've been doing since we were all working from home, we managed even to be in more meetings than sometimes we could be if you were to be there physically. And you managed even to transbound, as in, we are talking to people from all over the world within a span of 1 hour. And you can imagine, sometimes we are so busy when things are okay or when things are normal, we're so busy that if I was looking for Esmere to have a chat with her, she'll tell me, hey, I'm flying to Nelspruit, you know. If I was looking for Kojo to maybe have a chat with him, he'll tell me, my brother, I'm in Dakar, Senegal. But now we are back in one, you can be assured that I'll get you at home. And then let's look at this as an opportunity.
That's true.
Let's look at this as an opportunity maybe to start something new. Number one, let's look at those organizations. Esmere, you know, we always talk about collaboration. We always talk about competition. But let's look at those organizations which we always put in our rank to work with. And let's now start speaking with their CEOs and their boards, whether collaboration and partnership, at the end of this, nobody's going to make it alone unless you collaborate or you come together. I always like saying, stronger, we can come together and we can walk far. But alone, you can only walk the farthest that it can take you. So my parting shot is, let's look at opportunities around Africa, where SAACI, where ICCA, where SAACI, where Kojo's organization, and where AFSAE can actually look to each other's eye and say, can we make it if we come together as strong? And then create those relationships and create those bonds that can actually transcend post-COVID era.
Fantastic. Jeffers, as they say, never waste a good crisis, right? Thank you for those words. And I'm fully with you there. Let's move to Esmarie. What are your thoughts before we have to sign off?
Yes, I think at the moment we all very much, and we've used the word plenty of times this afternoon, we all collaborating and we're doing stuff together and we're having all these calls and webinars. I'm just really hoping then when life is back to normal, we don't just start to work in our own little silos and we just focus on what we have to do like today and tomorrow and next week. But we actually, our industry is a people's industry. People want to meet face to face. Yes, we will always, I think after this, we will definitely still do plenty of webinars and plenty of Zoom meetings, because it does save a bit on traveling. Maybe you don't always have to get into your car and go to a meeting, in my case, somewhere else in Cape Town. Maybe we can have a face-to-face Zoom meeting. But I really think that we need to, as a continent also, work even more closer together to make sure that Africa really grows for all business events sectors. So I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, keep on collaborating even after COVID-19 and on the same level that we are busy communicating and collaborating at the moment.
I agree, and it's true that we have all become very disconnected in recent times, especially with social media and all these other good things. We kind of forget that, you know, like Esmarie and I live 10 kilometers apart and we see each other in foreign countries when we attend events like IMEX. So not all bad news, and it's good to hear the positive feedback. Kojo, can we have a final word from you before we finish off with Clinton, please?
No, I think that, I mean, like what the panelists have said, or other colleagues have said, it's I mean, there's always a silver lining that you have to look at it, but also we have to be, I mean, we have to take cognizance of the fact that we just have to have a critical look going forward to ensure that we don't become too much susceptible. I mean, external factors, you can't prevent it, but putting the blocks that would ensure at least you have some shocks that can hold some of the things. So collaboration is always key to do that, and also it will be key for us to create a lot of awareness in terms of the business event space or the meeting space, actually much more in West Africa and part of Central and East Africa, because this is completely a new word for them. Most of them do not understand. And if you speak to high-level decision makers like ministers and director generals, then you will see how the deficit that they have in terms of understanding that. So going forward, I believe that people who have the good, who have the experience of that can be able to bring aboard other countries to be able to learn and take it up from there. Because Caesar was telling me that South Africa, for example, because every time he was saying that it would be good to see South Africa as a leader in terms of other aspects of events, stuff like that, and then we can leverage on the continent to become something that we can always be proud of. So these are my last words.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Clinton, before I hand over closing words to you, I just want to say to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we'll be looking at convention bureaus. We'll be talking to some leaders across the continent. Also, the event space, we'll look at some venues as well. Yeah, and just getting a general feel for what are we doing, where are we going. As we said earlier, trying to plan ahead at the moment is nearly impossible, but I think we've had some very positive input from the various associations this afternoon, and although everything is looking a little bit bleak at the moment, there are a few rays of light and opportunities that we can explore into the future. And with that, Glenton, final words over to you before we close the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks again for having all of us on the call today. But I think the clarity for me is that we need to remain connected for a purpose. And I think our purpose obviously now is getting us through our lockdowns and through COVID-19. But if we don't remain connected after this, whatever we've chatted about, no matter how many webinars we've hosted, it all goes back to what we have experienced before, and we spoke, but we didn't see any action. I think what this has allowed us to do is actually sit down, and as somebody said on the call earlier, we know where to find each other, which is basically at home. So if we can remain connected as we start getting busy out of the lockdown, I think we'll achieve much more for the rest of the continent, and also leverage off each other's networks as we go forward as well.
Absolutely.
So thanks to everybody for making time. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.